Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast, presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in. On this episode of the podcast, host Craig Jeffery interviews Chris Gerda, Risk and Fraud Prevention Officer of Bottomline Technologies, on the current and projected impact of fraud on the finance and treasury environment. Topics of discussion center around corporate fraud concerns, security spend, hacking tactics, recent events, and the value of the 2020 Treasury Fraud and Controls Survey. Listen in to find out how you can help protect your organization on the fight against fraud.
Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast. This is Craig Jeffery. The title of our episode is Treasury Fraud and Controls. I'm with Chris Gerda. Chris is the Risk and Fraud Prevention Officer at Bottomline Technologies, and he's responsible for the overall anti-fraud strategy and technology initiatives that protect Bottomline's PayMode-X payment network. He has a professional experience that spans 14 years in military, law enforcement, and the BSA AML compliance at major financial institutions. He has investigated and managed a wide variety of financial crimes. He strives to build and strengthen organizational cultures of compliance and focuses on hardening and developing detection and prevention technologies. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you, Craig. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about the Treasury Fraud and Controls Survey, go through some recent fraud incidents and tactics, and really highlight the benefit of the survey.
Yeah, glad to have you on. And I want to give a little bit of background because I want you to go through a few stories of fraud. I don't want to just talk about the survey, but I want to talk about some of the things that are going on. So just some background. Some of our recent surveys that we've done together show that, what's going on with awareness, spend, and actual losses. We certainly see that the awareness of fraud, the expectation that it has increased, the understanding that's increased is significantly raised. Organizations are spending more. They're feeling better about their position, but actual losses are not going down. So we do see from the survey year after year that there are a number of missing practices or substandard practices. People feel better because they spent more, but they still have significant losses. So there's different types of gaps that exist. So I think that's an interesting environment. People are paying more attention, know it's a bigger issue, spending more, but the losses continue. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, but I did want to hear some stories that you've been working with or following on fraud losses.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we're seeing is people are more keen to some of the tactics, but the fraudsters are continually becoming more sophisticated in their attacks, both in how they target businesses very specifically, but also they're using automation to do more and more attacks. You see them being very successful. Their U.S. BEC fraud losses are around $301 million a month in 2018. So that's a significant statistic that basically says the fraudsters are going to keep at it until we actually really band together, both from a technology, people, and process perspective, to start blocking that out.
Yeah, and I was just wondering if we could jump in. So you said U.S. BEC, so BEC is business email compromise. Could you just give a quick definition of what this type of fraud is?
Yeah, absolutely. To clarify, business email account compromise, it comes in a variety of different forms, but it generally involves the fraudster compromising an existing business's email and then using that access to misroute payments. It also could involve spoofing that email or making the email look as if it's from the actual business to misroute payments. But it could also even flow into, making the domain of that email very similar to the real business and duping the other party into believing they're communicating with someone who's legitimate. It's also involved in a little bit in CEO fraud, I guess, too, as well. They talk about BEC fraud, someone inside your organization attempting to get you to do things.
Okay, so business email compromise, obviously the term has email in it, but this idea of spoofing, like you mentioned, CEO or imposter fraud, where someone's pretending to be something else, has traditionally come through the email route. But is it limited to that, or do we just need to call it imposter fraud or spoofing? What's your take on that?
It's definitely limited in the email space for some of the tactics, but the fraudsters, you see them evolve a little bit. One of the more wild stories, so to speak, that you've seen recently, the Wall Street Journal published an article about a CEO who had his voice cloned by using AI, and the fraudsters were basically able to speak, and the output sounded as if it was from that CEO. And if you're someone with a really unique voice and they're calling around your organization to someone who may have experience interacting with you, that's very believable, and also very targeted. But that's the depths they're going to go to get in the middle of these really large payments.
So we have to watch our emails and our phones. But I got you off track. I think you started with some additional stories, and I wanted to let you continue.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one of the most interesting stories so far. Some of the other things we're hearing is purchase order fraud. You have fraudulent purchase orders being submitted to businesses who are then filling those purchase orders and shipping out goods and then invoicing. And the company that did the purchase order is saying, I didn't actually make that purchase order. So goods are shipped to a fraudulent location and then redirected overseas. So you have payments security, but you also have your security of the things that you're selling, and people are actually trying to steal those goods as well. So they're coming at you from multiple angles, both the physical goods that you ship every day as part of your business, but also the payments themselves. So securing communication is really what it boils down to, both in your payments and then in your orders, and finding a way to do that, both using technology, but also really layering in some policies to make sure you do your double checks. That's definitely one that's up and coming, more prevalent, hard to spot, especially it takes advantage of that trusted relationship.
The attack, initially seemed like it was heavily focused on information, and they didn't stop seeking to get information. They went after money in the payment stream, and now you're saying they're also adding this, let's see if we can get physical goods out of organizations through this. So whatever way they can convert things to money, either goods, information, or actually money, they're doing that. That's pretty interesting how they keep expanding that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a multi-pronged attack. Anything they can convert to cash is a target, and all of that boils down right to that communication piece. One of the recent interesting investigations was an international one. There are actually two. One last year in June and one this year in September. They call them Wired and Rewired, and they're U.S. Department of Justice, FBI-involved investigations that really involved some of the first really public efforts in international law enforcement cooperation to break down these BEC fraud scams and networks that are defrauding U.S. businesses. They had 74 arrests in one of them, 29 in the U.S., 29 in Nigeria, and then some speckled around other countries. And that's just great shared information. What we've seen is losses creeping up because we can't get to the criminals in the other countries. So this was really nice to see that kind of come out. I think that's one of the things that the Strategic Treasury Survey is really helpful in, is bringing those combined intelligence scenarios together in one pile for everyone to share. And that's how we really drive these types of investigations and the need for law enforcement to get cooperative internationally. What I thought was interesting about one of them is one of the masterminds of the scheme was actually on the cover of Forbes magazine in Africa for being like top 40 under a certain age. And so he was running a whole host of legitimate businesses, but on the side making all of his cash from scheming U.S. entities out of funds. He's probably the same place that a lot of these purchase order frauds are actually shipping goods to, because he's got the legitimate business infrastructure to flip those kind of things over. So large criminal organizations. I think the attacker isn't really your one-off guy anymore. It's a very sophisticated set of people.
So if you can get all your goods shipped to you for free, your cost of goods sold is pretty low.
Yeah,
That might help you make it to Forbes
yeah, you might.
Forbes 40 under 40 list.
It'll get you there. I mean, you're paying for shipping and not much else. That's about it.
Is that one of the examples of the FBI investigation coordination overseas, or is that a different?
That's the FBI coordination overseas with authorities in Nigeria to start cracking down on what we've been seeing in the U.S. for several years now, and has really taken off.
Yeah, so I know you have some more stories, and I do want to hear those, but I just wanted to talk for a moment about what's the position and posture of the attackers, because you've given some examples, and they're persistent. They come after people. They're automated, like you said. They're not only doing targeted attacks. They're leveraging automation, and they're much better at it. The sophistication of that voice spoofing of the CEO. That's just one example of many how sophisticated they are. And I think the other one that we didn't really talk about yet, but you and I talked about earlier, was how patient they are. They'll wait, they'll figure out what goes on, they'll learn and surveil an organization, and then act. And as we think about those, the patience of what goes on, you talked about phone or voice. What are some of the things you're seeing there where people are being patient, learning? The criminals are being patient and learning. Maybe you could comment on that.
Yeah, I think they're doing research, and that's part of the patience as well. They're really looking at who they're going to call on the phone and attempt to socially engineer, and who they're trying to impersonate, what actual individual they'll try and bring in, those real life emotional things that they've learned about after they've compromised an email to gain your trust. So much more sophisticated on the phone social engineering piece, and also very sophisticated in who they're targeting. They have this concept of who is a very attacked person in your organization. So it's not just the CEO, it's really a wide variety of people. And they're really getting into those people's backgrounds, looking at their LinkedIns, looking at their social media, seeing who they know, and to give them really a good aura of impersonation of those individuals when they're trying to get in the middle of a really big payment. A good example recently, it's a Japanese-based company with an American arm, Nikkei, and they lost a $29 million to a BEC fraud, and that was an impersonation fraud from inside. So someone was impersonating one of the bosses internally and had someone send funds. It's a really large loss, but they're very targeted in who they're trying to be and who they're trying to communicate with, as if they know there's a relationship there already that they can take advantage of. So a little bit of a long-winded answer on patience, but they're lying in wait very well from a research perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. They're playing the long game. That's the patient example. I'll give one. It's interesting. You see it reported that there's a lot of encrypted data being stolen, that it's known and expected that it's not crackable. It would take, over 10,000 years with supercomputers, but large amounts of data that's encrypted has been lifted and stolen. And the concept there is that the computing power will eventually allow them to crack it and then have access to this trove of data. Just because they couldn't get to it, they know they'll be able to get to it at some point, whether this is nation state actors, criminal rings, etc. There's that concept there. I don't know if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, I think when you told me that, I was pretty shocked. And you don't think of that, and it's not something that I've thought of. And then when you were mentioning it, I was like, well, it's kind of a great idea, right? Computing power could advance within 5 years, and if you haven't updated your password, and that's what was encrypted, obviously different levels of encryption, they may be able to get to that. Really interesting. I think about, you have these hacking competitions where the biggest tech companies in the world pay ethical hackers and teams to try and see if they can take advantage of the systems. And they do that on an ongoing basis because the hacking tactics are advancing, and so they have to make their products as secure as the hacker's sophistication. They recently have one in China. I think they call it the Tianfu Cup. It's one of the most well-known ones. And day one, you had multiple Microsoft, Google, Apple exploits where these guys were able to get into products in some sort of way or form. And they were rewarded for their hack so that the companies can stay ahead of that. It's a really penetration testing is what it is. And that's the same way I think with encrypted data. Advice to the consumer, update your passwords. It's probably been compromised at some point. And like you said, they're just waiting to crack it in some shape or form. There's a really cool website called Have I Been Pwned? It's a commonly used website across the security community to put your email in and see if you've been compromised in a reported breach. And you can get to see what breach it was in and then kind of update yourself to change up your security measures if you had shared passwords between multiple applications.
You also talked about an app that had something to do with facial recognition. Why don't you explain what you meant by that?
Yeah, I like this story. So it's a viral story about an app that has been around for a while but went viral because a lot of celebrities were downloading it. And it takes, you take a picture of your face and then it ages you. And it shows you what you're going to look like in 30 years. Who doesn't want to see how cool you're going to look in 30 years, right? Like, are you going to have gray hair? What's the beard going to work like? You know, do you need to start doing your moisturizing cream now because you don't like what you're going to see? So it really got a lot of people to take pictures of their faces. And then the story was, oh wait, this was developed by a Russian developer, and they're taking all of our photos and they're moving it over into Russia so they have pictures of all of us. And I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, all of our pictures are already on Facebook profiles and LinkedIn profiles. So I'm not really sure where the scare is here. And then there was another piece of it going, you gave them access to your entire photo roll on your phone. And so some cybersecurity researchers kind of dug into this, and they really determined, where the servers were. They talked to the company, and it kind of hashed out, after the Good Morning America news report, that it looked like the data centers were, Amazon, Google type of data centers. And it really went viral, but when you break it back down, it wasn't that serious. But what it showed to me that was shocking is how many people are thinking about biometric security and their facial recognition. And it was the country. Everyone was thinking about it. Everyone was hearing the news media put it out there. And that was actually inspiring. It was good to see everyone band together on something so complex, start thinking about their own data and their own security on a day in, day out basis in their consumer lives. It spills right over into business. And whether or not it's malicious or not, I don't think that it was. It's really nice to see it all come together. Everyone kind of saying, hey, we need to get this under control. Stop giving out our information, or start thinking more thoughtfully about it.
Well, Chris, we wouldn't be paranoid if everyone wasn't out to steal our stuff.
I know, right?
Hey, well, you tell the story about the hacking the voice methods, and you're like, well, facial recognition pictures, that's a lot easier to believe than the voice part, but that's where we are now. But I wanted to shift a little bit in terms of strengthen posture, strengthening our defenses. And, I'll just give you a setup for you to comment on this. I mean, there is a common error we see not only in the surveys, but in companies, where they only focus on one aspect. They only focus on the tech defenses, or only focus on the people defenses. And there does need to be a balance. I mean, I guess more often than not, it's a focus on the tech, not the people. But what's the way that we can make sure that we maintain a balance of protecting our defenses in every area evenly, or more balanced defense?
I think this is one that the survey does a great job in bringing out to the forefront. A lot of questions about different technology investments, different people investments, and where people are actually putting their resources. But I think it's definitely a blend. When you're doing people, a 10-question yearly quiz on security really doesn't cut it. You've got to invest in employee growth to change your fraud posture. Right? Really nice training, get them out there, get them learning, go to some organizations that can help you get some fraud-specific training spend a couple hours every quarter knocking some of that out, and you'll see your culture evolve as you have those people cross-pollinating with others with what they've learned. And that's a minor investment to kind of do that. On the technology side, I think there's some fear because of buzzwords, right? When you think technology, you think machine learning, artificial intelligence, and you're like, I'm just not ready for that kind of major investment. But I think if you break it down to its simple parts and look at your organization, you might not need anything that sophisticated for what you're doing. You might just need centralized incident reporting where someone can actually make decisions and be heard. That's technology, just case tracking, and really email security, an investment in getting email security to tell you when you have an email from the outside that doesn't have the right stuff in the internet header that's in the back end, or utilizing that group and threat intelligence of everyone that subscribes to that email security provider is reporting things that are suspicious, and they're seeing millions and millions of emails a day in traffic and analyzing all of them for the benefit of each of their customers' protection. So you take advantage of everybody else's group threat intelligence is kind of what I call it. And those are just minor switches. And policies are tough as well. When you think about what do I have today in my policies, how do I improve those policies, I think roll up your sleeves every once in a while and get in with your people on the ground in your AP departments and see where your checks and balances are, see what their pain points are, and then have a candid conversation if you can solve that with a policy or if you just need a little bit of a technology boost to just underlay a process. It kind of works really well when you take those small steps. It's a huge improvement in an organization.
Yeah, maintaining the balance and addressing both fronts. I guess in the context of, a lot of things related to compliance and security are viewed as overhead. It's not revenue generating. How do you find companies, or how do you help companies see beyond that to make the spend to not just view security as overhead?
Yeah, I think, you said it perfectly. They're trying to steal our products. They're trying to steal our money. They're trying to steal our identities and our data. And they're trying to siphon off everything they can from a business. I think if you think about anti-fraud security and you separate it from IT security, like everyone knows you have to have IT security and it has to be the right bubble around your organization for what you're doing. The same thing goes with fraud security and preventing misrouted payments. You're operating in a digital world, and so you have to be digital about it. You have to be emotionless about your security posture because they're using social engineering to try and take advantage of your emotions. So I think that it's not overhead anymore. It's a must have, the way that we're attacked in today's environment, and the multi-pronged and persistent approach that we talked about. Very hard to exist in business. It's almost a requirement to keep you going, and it's just a recognition of that. And if you have really good security posture, what we're seeing now is that's actually driving business deals. So depending on the type of business you do, you have to start your conversation with providers and vendors with what's your security in your organization look like. And if you don't have that, you can't build that trust that's really necessary to actually do the relationship that you need to do. So it's an evolution of how people do business as well. It's almost part of the sales cycle. It's part of the sales conversation. And if you have a good story when it comes to your anti-fraud and security posture, it helps you win business if it's positioned correctly.
Yeah, some good points there. So now looping it back to the Treasury Fraud and Controls Survey, and I do want to thank you and Bottomline for underwriting the survey for multiple years, for the entire life that this survey's been running. But why does this survey exist? Why should someone invest the time to take it? Why should they hear the results? And then finally, what's a key thing that you're learning over time?
You know what? Very simple. You're contributing to a group intelligence project that's going to help your organization grow in the fight against fraud. You're going to get to see, first, you're not alone. You're going to see where other people are positioned in your same industries. Really get interesting answers to unique questions that you can actually make leadership's decisions off of them in your organizations. I also really love the fact that participating in it, you get this wealth of information coming back to you. This really helps inside of your own organization. You can send it around, make people aware that there's 1,000 other businesses out there, and this is kind of what they're seeing too. It refreshes the continued training within an organization, and it snaps people out of complacency when you see it. So you can use it really advantageously inside an organization. But you can also, send it out to your business partners and let them know about it as well, because they're going to benefit from that same intelligence. They're going to feel really good that you're part of something so forward thinking and that you're sharing that with them as well. So I also like the survey because it talks not just about like what happened, it talks about the attempts. And it's really critical to recognize the attempts and share information about the attempts rather than the things that are just reported as actual confirmed fraud, because there's so much learning in the attempts that we can actually adjust our programs off of from a people perspective and a technology perspective that keeps us moving ahead, security forward for sure.
Excellent. So as we wrap up, Chris, I wanted to give you a chance to say any final salient thoughts that you didn't say or you just wanted to emphasize at the end here. And I do appreciate your time and talking through these with me.
Yeah, absolutely, Craig. It's been great being here. I think the theme is being stronger together, and information sharing is critical to staying ahead of the fraud. It's critical to leading in strategic positions to know when you should pivot, and it's going to help you win business in the long run and stay mindful of your posture and keep ahead of the times. Information is like oil now, and this is a big pile of it that can help everyone get better at blocking out fraud.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining me on this Treasury Update podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Craig.
For more information or to participate in the 2020 Treasury Fraud and Controls Survey, visit strategic.treasurer.com/fraud. Thank you for joining us in the fight against fraud.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.